Good morning, everybody. It's pretty loud, this one. Okay. So my name is Flemming Petersen. I'm an application developer in the NAV team. I'm here to present the web client and the NAV portal client. But before I do that, I'll just make an ask for you. After this session, when you go out the door, there will be somebody handing out a survey around testability. Will you please fill this in and then return it to us in the expert lab when you're done? So when that's mentioned, let's get started with this new thing. In NAV 2013, we released 2 new clients. On the right, the SharePoint. You can't say that the SharePoint is a client. It's more like a framework that you can build on top of. And then we have the web client on the right. So today we will cover these aspects or give you an insight into what the web client is about, what the SharePoint framework is about, and then at the beginning I will start a little bit with how we do application for these 2 new clients and what are the limitations or differences for you need to be aware of when you do development for these 2 new clients. So, if you look at the application today, everything should work out of the box when you start up the web client. You need to do some extra work for the SharePoint client, but for the web client, everything will work. Of course, as I said before, we have some limitations, and I'll get back to that later. When we started this development, we thought, okay, we need somehow to make an application for you that will show that it's easy to make new application features for these new clients. So that's why we introduced the timesheet feature. But just to start, as I said, everything out of the box should work on the web client except for the limitations that we have, of course. And then a second thing is that when you think about that we have 3 clients or more, these new web clients is not going to replace the RTC client, because the target group for these 2 new clients is more lightweight ERP users, not the heavy Windows, heavy ERP users that should use the Windows client. So let's talk a bit about the timesheet feature. In the beginning, if you look at the top drawing, it was the scope that we thought about in the beginning. What should it do, this timesheet feature? It should be an easy and lightweight application that will make you able to enter time into NAV in a light and easy way. And then when time passed, and you can see in the lower corner, is that, of course, we need at some point also to integrate it to the ERP functionality, such as resources, jobs, service, and so on. To be able to talk about this is of course pretty easy, but it's also easy just to show it in a demo. So I'll just close this one and then go into the web client. And it's pretty easy, as you can see. You have a link to the web client and you start it up, and then you're up running. If you look at this, you can see that it looks pretty similar to what you have in the RTC. And I can bring that up also, so you can see how they look together. We have the RTC here. And then we have the web client here. You can only see half of the screen, but sorry for that. But you can see they are not so different. And as I said, everything works out of the box. So to play a little bit with this web client, I'll try to make some demos about the timesheet feature. So I'll close the RTC client, and use the web client for the features. So I need to set up the timesheet feature. As you can see here, we also have a search functionality in the timesheet feature. I'll of course first need to set up the thing, so I'll have to set up the users. And you can see that it's almost as easy as doing the actual same thing in the RTC. So here we have, I've set up to start with, so we didn't have to do that, a user myself. And then I would like this user to register time. So I'll go in and edit the list as we do in the RTC and say, yes, this user needs to register time. And of course, due to the fact that I'm the only user in this demo, I'll also be the admin for this timesheet feature. That's the setup for the user. If we then go in and look at how do we then tie this registration of time into the ERP, then we have tied it to the resource. So I'll go in and bring up the resource card. And in this demo, I'll be Linda. Not to think about anything, but then in a timesheet feature, we have created 3 new fields, as you can see here. I have to check this check mark because I need to use the timesheet feature, and then I need to tie this resource to a login, and this is me. And then we also built in something called approval. This is something about that normally when you have a business, you would not like, for example, a technician just to put in time without anybody approving it. So you can put in an approver for this resource. So he can send the time registration to that approver. It could be his manager, it could be the project manager, it could also be the project manager. So for this demo's purpose, I'll just put in myself again as the approver. So that's actually it. Now Linda is ready to use the timesheet registration, but to be able to do that, we need to create some timesheets. And I could do that by clicking this report up here. That is a report that will create timesheet periods for Linda. Because I'm standing on Linda, that's why it's, if you see down here, it's filled out with that it's Linda who I'm creating this timesheet feed as well. But if you delete this, then it will be for all resources who are tied to this timesheet functionality. But now I'll create 4 periods for Linda to put time into, and you can see here that I got a message saying, okay, these 4 periods are now created. Fine. So that's it. Now I'm totally finished and ready to use the timesheet. But to be able to put in an extra layer on this, I've just noticed that you can see here up in the role center that it's sales order processor. But Linda, she's not the sales order processor. She's the resource manager. Okay. Then I'll go in and change the profile. And you can see it's almost the same as the RTC client. It's pretty easy and works pretty fast, hopefully. Come on. Thank you. Sorry about that. No, now I can't spell. Here we go. So you can see here in the profiles that the default profile for this installation is sales order processor, but I would like to use another one. So I can go down and find the resource manager, which is this one. I'll then go in and edit that and say, okay, this should be the default for this demo, so I'll just set it as a default. And then you can see magic happens. Then now the resource manager is the default. So I'll close that. So you can see now, you have seen now that I have set up the resource manager as a default, but the role center hasn't changed yet. And that's because I need to log out first before this will come into effect. So I'll log out and log in again. And now you can see that I'm the resource manager. Fine. Then I'm Linda, and I want to put in some time for the first period. And you can see we have a new item here called timesheets, where you can see the 4 periods that I created before. And then you can go in, for example, on the first one. And here you have the timesheet. Now we can see that it's pretty limited to what I've put in of fields, because normally on a website it's pretty limited what you can see, and it isn't a nice user experience to scroll back and forth. But I can see in this view that I actually am missing some fields. But the problem is that I cannot go into the web client and then add these fields, so I need to go back to the RTC now to be able to do that. So I'll do that. So I'll go in the same way as the web client, and then take the first, and then I'll go up and say, okay, I need some new fields. I would like also to use the job number and job task, because I know that I'm working on jobs. I also work on service orders. I also need to have some cause of absence, because sometimes I'm sick. And that's it. I'll say okay, and say okay, and then I'll close this down and go in again. And now you can see that I have added the fields to the RTC client. Now I'll go back to my web client and try to see if I got the new fields. But no, I didn't get it. And that's because you need to restart the service tier to be able to get these, or you need to log out again to get these fields into action. I hope no, it didn't work, of course. So I'll just do this instead. And then you can also see that we have a new tool. We have a tool called Microsoft Dynamic Server, where you can see that it's running. I need to restart it. And hopefully it will work now. So you can see by showing this, you can see that it is pretty cumbersome to do the dynamic configuration as we have in the RTC compared to the web client. So now it's running, and I'll go back and sign in. Hopefully. So go into my timesheet again. Take the first one. No, it didn't come. Why didn't it come? Great. Sorry for that. It worked yesterday. No. Anyway, I'll just skip this. So in order to be able to enter in time, I have some possibilities here. I can, as I said before, put time on resources. I could put time on a job. I could put time on a service order. I could put some absence, and then I can put time on an assembly order also. So for this demo purposes, I'll just use the resource, and then put in that I know that I used 8 hours on Monday. Now, to be able to get this into NAV, the Linda needs to have her manager approve it. So she will submit it for approval. Now you can see that I get up a pop-up window telling me that if I have had several lines here, it would have had telling me that do you want to send all the lines or only this one that you have selected. And this is due to the fact, as I also will talk about it a bit later, that we have some limitations in the web client itself that you cannot multi-select a grid that you have. So now I'll just take everybody, all the lines. And now you can see here that it has been submitted. Now I'll go back to my role center, and now I'll play Linda's manager. And she will say, okay, Linda did some work yesterday. Then she will go in and say, okay, I have, in this view, I'm as a manager will have all the timesheets for all the resources that I'm approving. So if I have 6 resources, I will have the timesheets of all those 6 resources in this window. But now I'll go in and look at the first one, because I know that's Linda, and I know that Linda did some work yesterday. And I can see, yeah, Linda did 8 hours of work as a resource yesterday. It's nothing that I can actually put on a job or a service order, but I know that we need to cover this course and submit it into the resource journal. So I'll just say, yes, this is okay. And now, again, I'll get the pop-up because we cannot multi-select in the view. And that's it. Now I then can go back into the resource journal and put in these information, but I'll not show that in this. So, what about limitations or differences between these clients? Sure, there are some, because it's also different target groups that we are targeting with these new clients. I have put them into 4 categories here. We have some general limitations, then we have some object and feature limitations, and then we have CL triggers and functions deeper down in the CL code, and then we have some user interface features that we are not supporting, or some of them are partly supported. Sorry for that. So, in general, chart parts are not supported in the web client, meaning that if you saw the role center that I showed in the RTC, the sales order processor, in the RTC we have a chart, and it was not shown in the role center, and that's because it's not supported. Secondly, COM and automation are either not supported. This list can go on, that's why I only will show a couple of them. Partly supported is search. You can see, you saw that I was searching in the web client. It's searching for pages and reports, but it's not searching for views as you can do in the RTC client, and so on. And also the configuration I showed you, it didn't work, but normally it will work. That you will not be able to configure anything in the web client. You need to do that in the RTC, and then show it in the web client. If we go into objects and features, as you probably noticed, the menu suite is not supported in the web client. We didn't have a department menu in the web client. The navigation page type is not supported, and this list will also go on. Partial supported is XML ports, but without any request pages. Fixed layout control for arranging the pages are partly supported, and this means that in some cases, if you have many fields in a web page, they will not be aligned properly. If we go into CL triggers and functions, then dialog update is not supported. Automation create is not supported. Partial supported is on close page, on drill down. And last, user interface features. Buffering of keyboards are not supported in the web client. Select all features, as I showed you, are not supported, and that's why we get these pop-up windows saying, do we want to have one line or all of them? And lastly, partly supported is the personalization, as I talked about before. You cannot go in and personalize the website as you can in the RTC client, and then help is also only partially supported. All these and much more of differences and limitations are in the documentation, and are also on our MSDN site, so you can go and read about them there. And that's it for me. Now I'll switch over to Kim, and he'll talk you through a bit more about the web client. Thank you.
Thank you, Flemming. So how do you actually get this client up and running? Let's assume that you did the demo installation, and then you simply only need to run the installation again and then add the web server components. If you enable the IIS beforehand, you need IIS 7. Then by default, the dependencies for the web client is actually installed along with the installation of the web client components. So you basically just need to press next, and then the browser will launch and the client will show, just as Flemming just showed you. So when it's installed, the next thing you need to do is to find out what kind of authentication you need. I know some of the previous sessions yesterday actually covered these authentication types. I will just run them over for a recap. Windows is, of course, just using your credentials, and you don't need to log in, just your Windows account that is actually authenticating you. The last three are all using another authentication type in the IIS. This is kind of like why it is important to know which kind of authentication type you're using. So if you're using username that is also authenticating you against the Active Directory, here you actually need to enter your credentials and password for the for your Windows account in the Navision dialogues. This is also still using a form authentication on the IIS. Now username and password is also a username password authentication mode. This is stored in database and is purely from NAV. ACS is covered in detail at the Azure session yesterday, so I encourage you to see that one instead of me explaining what it's all about. So if I is going to show you a bit about the authentication types, I will switch to the IIS manager. Here you can see I have 3 different sites. The default one, here port 80, is just using Windows authentication. So here I'm just in instantly without any prompting of my credential. If I use this side here that I configured to use username password and launch that one. Oops. See, you can now see I'm a NAV user here instead of from a Windows account. So this, in order for you to shift between the authentication types, what you need additional from what you normally do in the Windows client, you need to change the authentication in the configuration of the website. And you do this by looking at the web config file. And I will cover the web config file just a bit. But here you can see this section is actually telling the IIS that you need form authentication instead of Windows authentication that you can see is remarked just above. So that's basically what is different. Actually, there's one more thing I need to show you here. You also need to enable the form authentication mode in the IIS and disable the Windows authentication. That's also highly important. So after you chose your authentication type and you want to expose the site to the internet, you for sure need to enable HTTPS on the channel so you can secure your data. And you do this by get a certificate, and you can buy that, for instance, on VeriSign, wherever you normally buy your certificates. Then you need to enable port 443 on the IS, and then the most important part is to actually redirect all traffic on the not secure channel HTTP to the HTTPS channel. And I'll just quickly show you that. So here you can see I have the default port 80 open on the side. I just browsed that one earlier. And here I actually have the 443 port enabled. You can see here in bindings that the HTTP is enabled. And here I actually used my own self-signed certificate. You can do this for testing purposes. Create your own certificate, takes a matter of minutes. And here in this demo, I actually trusted my certificate in the browser, so you won't see any warnings when I show you the HTTPS running here in a second. So I go to the site, and you can see here it says localhost. Just change that to my machine name. And if I change the channel to HTTPS, it just works. You can see here that it is actually secure. And then, see, you need to enable the last part, important part, so the user don't use the unsecure channel. And you can do this by changing the web config file again. I prepared a little URL rewrite snippet here. And now I'm saving the web config file, and for those not familiar with the IS, this also triggers the website to restart. So I just go back in the browser, hit F5, and you can see here it actually is redirecting the user to HTTPS. So now you're good to go, have it online and everything. So by now you can see I've been in the web config file a few times, and in basic the web config file consists of two major parts. The first is the configuration for the website, and the second is settings for NAV that you probably already know from the RTC, and I can show you that here. Here I opened the web config file in Visual Studio to get the highlighting, so it's a bit easier to see. If you look at the bottom part of it, you can actually see here is all the settings for NAV. And you can see in this case I changed the company. So user settings. Actually, the web client is using the user settings exactly as RTC is doing it today. However, it's not that clear how it actually works, and here it's more exposed how all the different settings are actually making the website appear and function differently than RTC. So I'll just go and talk a little bit about WinClient, how it actually works in user settings. It's like when you start the Windows client for the first time and hit the NST and don't specify anything in the config file, you will be authenticated in NST, and then afterwards the NST is actually sending all the user settings back to the client, for instance the work date, the language, the company. And then the client will actually open up that company it got from the server saying, hey, I want to open Kronos, for instance. So if the user then goes and select another company, it's the client restarts, and it's not the, as you might expect, it's not the client saying to the server that he wants to open up the other company. It is actually, just before it shut down, it's said to the server that it's changing the company, and then the next time client starts, it doesn't specify what it actually needs to open. It connects to the server then says, okay, last time you were online, you actually use this company. So now this is what we are opening. And the same will the web client do. And to turn this behavior off, you can actually specify the configurations in the web config file. And to show you that, I created two subsites here. One is actually specifying company A and another company B. So if I browse to that one, you can see company A is open. And if I switch back, go to the other, you can see company B is now open. And these two companies are actually working side by side. So you can now see two companies at the same time in the same browser. Then I'll switch to talk a bit about sessions, mainly ASP.NET sessions and NST sessions. And you probably wonder why this is important. And for the user, it for sure is not important. But the trick here is that every session you create to the NST is actually taking a session according to the license file. So for instance, the demo I just showed you where I opened two companies at the same time is actually requiring two sessions according to the license. So a user can be actually using multiple sessions in the license at the same time. And those of you who actually know how the IS works, we also are using ASP.NET session a bit differently than is expected. So between the ASP.NET session and I can just show you this drawing here. So between the device, the web browser in this case, and the web server, the ASP.NET session is in play. And between the ASP.NET session and the NST session, there's a relationship that is many-to-many relationship. So the demo I just showed you, one ASP.NET session is actually having multiple NST connections. However, it also the possibility that you can have multiple ASP.NET sessions that is actually using the same NST session. So, and this is actually just taking place when you're opening up two browsers at the same time. It will actually get two different ASP.NET sessions, but it will then pick up the same NST connection and use that one. So it won't use two in this case, it will just use the same. And then a small request for you guys. Our help over the last few years have really improved, and you will now see the benefit of it when you go to the installed CHM files or the MSDN, and it's really good for guidance and troubleshooting. So I'm using myself for the parts of the platform that I'm not working on daily. And if you notice at the bottom of all these pages, there's provide feedback, and it's not going to some mailbox far away in Microsoft. It's actually going to our doc writer that is in the same hallway as we are located in the office. So he gets a mail when you click this link, and if he doesn't know how to actually reply or update the help, he will just go ask us, and we will provide him a good answer. So please use the feedback. Thanks, and I will turn it over to Lucas, talking about the SharePoint client.
Hello, thank you. Good morning, my name is, Thank you. My name is Lucas. I'm developer on the clients team in Navision. And what I'm going to talk about is the SharePoint client. Just enable sharing. Just a second. Yeah, it's fine now. So in my presentation, what I will cover is some basic facts about the SharePoint client. We call it NAV Portal Framework. It's because it's not exactly the client that you can just give to your users, but you need to actually go and set up all the pages and customize it for the user's needs. I will also go and discuss the architecture of Navision Portal Framework and NPF. I will show you how our solution is integrated with SharePoint. And I will show you some demos how you can use NAV web parts for SharePoint. And last, I will show you how you can use different brandings, themes by using CSS in SharePoint. Yep. So let me just start with some basic facts. Basically, NPF contains the same functionality that you've seen that is included in the web client. It's the same application development process as you could see. So you still use the classic client to create all the pages, and you get them both in the web client and in SharePoint client. And it all supports all the pages and the reports. What is important and the difference from the web and SharePoint client is that the NPF is a toolkit. So you need to go and for example, create your navigation pane. You need to create your web part pages when you create the custom role centers for your clients. That's why it needs all the customizations from you that you need to provide to the users. So here's the architecture of Navision platform framework. So it's basically what you've already seen for web clients. We have the SQL Server database. We have the Microsoft Dynamics server. And instead of as previous just the IIS server, we have the SharePoint server. And what we support is the SharePoint Foundation 2010 and SharePoint Server 2010. All the supported topologies in Microsoft SharePoint 2010 are all documented on our MSDN and help pages. So just go ahead and you can verify what kind of topology do we support for Microsoft SharePoint Server. So for the SharePoint specific functionality that we support is web parts, SharePoint web parts. You have the possibility to display the Navision NAV pages inside the web parts. What we also support is sending data from our NAV web parts to your web parts or standard SharePoint web parts through so-called SharePoint web part connection. So later on, I will show you a demo about it, how you can send a selected row from our NAV web parts and filter based on a parameter value which comes from another web part. What we also support is the SharePoint branding, which means that we support all the themes that SharePoint supports. This is done by using the same CSS styles that SharePoint supports. And you can go and change or add a new themes to your SharePoint. You can modify the CSS that we provide. You can also go and modify the master pages to fit your needs. We have the support for SharePoint Farm. And one big difference comparing also to web client is the supported version of authentications. In the SharePoint client, we support only Windows authentication through SharePoint. So we don't have any authentication dialogues. You basically log to the system through SharePoint, and we use the same Windows authentication. We also support the time zones and regional settings which you set in your SharePoint sites. So anything you set will be automatically adjusted in NAV pages. So some limitation in our SharePoint client. We don't include support for SharePoint Designer in this release, which means you need to, if you want to add the web parts or connect them, you need to use the web version of SharePoint Designer. As I already mentioned, only Windows authentication is supported, and it's supported through SharePoint authentication. And of course, as I also talk about this, there is no built-in navigation, as you could see in the web client, but you can easily build one in SharePoint. So how do you access the pages or report in SharePoint? There are two different ways. Either you use NAV web parts, and you do it by creating a web part page and then you adding our web part and choosing the page number. And in this scenario, you can add only pages in these web parts. The second option is using links to our URLs. And this gives you basically the same functionality as you have in the web client. And in these options, you have full support for pages and reports. So an example URL is just here. So what it does, it navigates to page 22, which probably you're most familiar is the customer list. But the syntax for all the parameters when you create the URLs is much more complex, and it's displayed. You can check it under the link that I provide in this presentation. What else you can set up? You can set up, of course, the page, report number. You can set additional filters, bookmarks ID, and many more. So let me give you a quick demo of how this works. So here's my extremely basic SharePoint site. So you could see I already created some small navigation here. So I have various lists, customer, sales order. So let me just create one more. So in the site settings, I will just add a quick launch link, for example, to my I'll just maybe add a new heading. So for example, we could add a link to our timesheet or timesheet list maybe. And I have a link somewhere here safe on my desktop. So I just need to give in the simple link just the ID of the page, which I guess for timesheet list is 951. And that's it, what you need to do. You already got the link, so navigating to it navigates to NAV page, which you will see in a minute. I just need to close the Kronos dialog. So that's what you get. You get exactly the same functionality, but in the SharePoint client. The same for the customer sales orders, and of course by clicking the link we show up the dialogues, the cards. Let me navigate now, and let me show you the second option of using the web parts. Okay, let me close this one. So as I mentioned before, in order to use web parts, you need to create the web part page. So let me create one. I go to page, web part page. Just give it a name, web part page 1. And just add the web parts, and you can find our web parts in the last category. It's called Microsoft Dynamics NAV web part. Just add it to the page. And then you need to use the tool pane to change the settings. And here in the drop down, you can actually see all the pages that you have in your current NAV solution. So let me just bring the timesheet list, for example, or the timesheet. I have also option to use either the standard web part caption or use the one from timesheet. Let me just do this instead. I click OK, and that's basically this. You get a NAV page inside of the web part. You just stop editing, and then you can go and add more web parts to your page, and in this way you can create your own role centers and the pages for your customers. Okay, let me just get back to the presentation. Yep, that was the demo part. And now I will talk a little bit about the web part connections. So what we provide is sending the selected row in our web part. And if you are familiar with SharePoint web part connection, is the interface iWebPart row that we are sending, and you can consume it in your own web parts. And for consuming, we use iWebPart parameter, which is used as a filter. So I think it's the easiest to show you as an example how it works. So I will show you the example based on 2 custom web parts that I created, and I can share the source code with you after the presentation. So what I need to do is again create a new web part page. I'll let it be now web part page 2. And what I will do first, I will add my own a custom web part. Is extremely simple web part. What it does is actually you can choose a duration. So it consists of 2 calendars where you choose a date from and the date to. So currently I'm choosing a range from 1st of January till 29th March. Okay, I will add the NAV web part right now. And just because we are in the timesheet topic, I will use the timesheet list again. And that's here. Let me use the caption from the web part. Okay, so now we have 2 independent web parts. But what I would like to do, for example, is that I would like to filter the list based on, for example, starting or ending date that is covered in a period which is set in my custom web part. So what I can do now is I go to the connection menu and I can send this duration filter to NAV web part, to the timesheet lead. And now SharePoint will ask me which column should it filter. So actually only 2 make sense in this situation. Is either the starting date or ending date. So let me use the starting date for an example. I can now stop editing. And you will see now that when I will change a date, for example, I will move my ending date somewhere close to beginning of February. You see the list is automatically filtered. So how it works is that the duration is sent to our web parts, and based on that, the filtering is performed and the output is displayed to you. So this is just an example with a custom filter. You can create your own more sophisticated for filtering, or you can use existing SharePoint web parts as well. So let me now go to another example. This example that I showed was sending a parameter to our web part, and in the second example, we will be receiving the data from the web part. So let me start with a clean web part page. And what I will do in this demo is that I will again create the timesheet list, and I will add a second custom web part which will display some charting. based on the data. And this is, of course, extremely useful since we don't support charting out of the box in the web client, but still you can use SharePoint charting to visualize the data. So let me add the timesheet list the same way as I just did 5 minutes ago. So timesheet list is here. And I will add one more. My second custom web part is the status chart. Okay, so they are again now not connected, completely separated from each other. So again, I need to go to the connection menu. And now, instead of this getting filter value, I need to send the row from our web part to my custom web part. So sending row from NAV to my timesheet status chart. Okay, and then now I can stop editing. And you can see that the data from the first timesheet is sent to my custom web part, and the data is about the number of hours and in which state they are. So you can see that there are 34 approved hours, and this is visualized on the graph. And whenever I change the selected row, the graph is also changing because a new data is sent to my web part. So in this way, you can do different visualization. And of course, whenever you change any data here, it will be automatically updated on the diagram. Yeah, so now I have to, I should have 5. Yeah. So in this way, you can create complex role centers and add your own code and integrate with our web parts. So the last demo that I have for today is about SharePoint branding. So let's say the customers may have different themes or different logos that you need to put inside of the client, and that's what you can do in our NPF framework. So first of all, we support, as I told you, all the styles from SharePoint. So if I will go and change the default theme of SharePoint, which is here, site theme, and then I can use maybe some fancy colors. Let's choose this one. Probably it will look extremely ugly, but just for the sake of the demo. It takes a little while to update it for SharePoint. Yeah, so that's how it looks right now. Yes, but well. So our web parts got automatically all the colors from the themes. It's all the consequence that we are using the same CSS styles. But you are also it's possible for you to modify the existing styles as well and change the master pages so you can customize the application to fit your needs. So that was my last demo. I think we still have a little bit of time. I can just quickly show you how easy it is to create your web parts in Visual Studio. So for example, I created those 2 duration and charting web part. In order to create a web part, you just follow up the wizard in Visual Studio. You need to create a class which inherits from web parts. That's it basically. And then if you want to send some data to another web parts as a filter, you inherit from the iTransformable filter values. And then you need to implement those very simple interfaces, where you allow all the values, what's the parameter name, and then the parameter values, which in my case is just the duration text. That's all you need to do, plus provide the connection provider as an attribute. And for the other charting web parts, it's also similar. similar class, but instead of the interface for providing the filter, it's actually consuming the row, which I hope I'll be able to show you. But actually, Visual Studio is actually pretty busy at the moment. I know why. Oh, that's not this class. Yeah, okay. So here is the charting web part. What you need to do is to have the connection consumer in this case, and that's how you get the provider and can get the row of the data. And then you can query the row of the data based on the ID of the column and feed it inside of the chart, for example, on any other web parts that is relevant to you. So that's basically it. What else you can do? You can integrate. If you have any solutions which are already based on the web services, you can try combining those two. You can use your own web parts. We use web services and communicate, for example, based on the selected row through our web parts. So that's how you can make the integration work. So that's it from my part. Now we'll have a little bit more time for questions and answers. And of course, we have 5 t-shirts for 5 first questions, I guess. So you're encouraged to ask anything.
And we also, for today, we got a runner with a mic.
I'll try to speak loud then. Have you got any experience with deploying the Windows client in a Citrix environment?
What, the Windows client or web?
The Windows client.
Deploying the Windows client on the
how
Citrix?
to use it?
No, we don't.
Nope.
I have no idea.
Do you know where I can find some information about it? On the MSDN, perhaps?
Try to go to the expert lab, and then we can find a person for you that can answer the question.
Yep.
So while the mic is running, I can just quickly go over the configuration and personalization. The web client and SharePoint is supporting the configuration, however, it is not supporting the personalization. And what Fleming actually accidentally showed was the personalization of the Windows client. If you start the Windows client with a -configure, it will actually configure the current profile active, and then it will show up in the web client afterwards. Yeah, question?
Hello, my question is about, is there any chance to integrate web parts with SharePoint lists and workflow functionalities? SharePoint workflow functionalities.
So excuse me, your question was about setting up the SharePoint farm and?
No, the integration between web parts, right, the one you showed, and external lists of SharePoint.
Yes, yes.
And on top we can run workflows.
I haven't tried myself, I think, with workflow list.
But you showed kind of integration between web parts on the interface, right? If
you use, for example, document list, you can connect it through the web parts connection. So, for example, you can have a web parts with the users, and then based on this, you can display documents for that particular user. For example, that's what you could do.
And next time I want a question down here in the front.
Yeah.
I have a question about compatibility issues. Basically, in the first part, you told us that common automations are not supported in a web client. However, we can run automation in client and in server. So what about automation which is run on the server, which is supposed to run on the server bit? And what about support of common automation objects in SharePoint client?
So just to repeat it to make sure I understand, it's around running COM objects on the web server?
Exactly. We have a common automation which could be instantiated on the client or at the server, and this is selected when you fire the create method and then tell the system where to start the automation. So question is, I understand that the automation might not be supported on the client side. What about automation components which are supposed to be run on the server side, and how it applies to SharePoint client?
Well, any object that you specify to run on the client in a C side, hence the web server, is not supported. It's only a server side in NST. So there is no COM or .NET object that is able to run on the client. It's only for WinForms, for the WinForms client.
Just one question. Is it possible to connect the web client to multiple instances of the NST?
So you have one web server and multiple NSTs?
Yeah. So in the example, a user's put a request through, one NST is working or it's being overloaded. Can the web client automatically do any form of load balancing or put different number of users through, say, a second instance of the NST?
If your question is whether or not the NST is capable of making sure that all the clients are being served, you should put a load balancer between the web server and NST. However, I would just put a web server per NST instead, and then have a load balancer in front of the web servers.
Hello. A question about the web client. We currently have a beta customer running 2013, the beta refresh build. And the problem I'm having with the web client is that I cannot set the language layer to Danish, for example. How is that solved?
So what? Say it again, please.
The language, change the language layer to Danish.
So and you're just setting it in a web config file?
Yeah.
And it doesn't apply, I guess.
So is there any specifics needed or special installation for language on the web client?
It should work.
Okay. Could you try it?
Change the language?
Yeah.
No, I only installed the one that was on I think I only installed the W1 version. I didn't add any extra languages.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
But we can have a look later in the expert labs, maybe. At the
and I also know in the documentation there's a sample how to actually have multiple sites running with different languages for each subsite.
Which version are you running? Is it RTM or maybe there were some changes from this? Or I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah, you should definitely look at the help. There is an example to show multiple languages.
Time zone. How are you handling time zone with companies who have users from multiple time zones, both over web client and SharePoint client?
Time zone is a touchy subject. It has been cut a bit compared to what you actually experience in the RTC Windows client. So each time zone is for each web server.
But here, I actually think in terms of web client, I see the web client as a perfect tool for traveling employees who are traveling around the world and need to go online and key in their time or similar things. So even say that in the web and the SharePoint, it's even more important than in the role tailored.
I can't remember how it actually works in SharePoint, but in web, the web config file has an entry for the time zone explicitly, and whatever you put in that is what all the users are using for the time zone.
So could you create, like, as you showed with the different companies, could you create like a different set for each time zone, or?
Yeah, well, how many sites you want to create, and you specify something different in each web config file, or you could actually put an inheritance. It's normal IS how it works. So if you put the config file in the root, and then you have all the differences in the subsites, then each subsite will actually have a different time zone.
Just questions about RTC over one. Is it always available since we have a new web client?
The Windows client over WAN or?
Over the one.
You're asking if that is possible?
Yes, we use it for a customer in NAV 2009.
So yeah, so if you want, we could easily just run the Windows client instead, and it will actually, if you use some of the other authentication types, it will run over the internet. If that was the question.
I just want to know if it's always available in NAV 2030.
I don't understand quite.
You know, in NAV 2009, you have the possibility to change in the config file the users the authentication to username and to provide certificates to use the RTC client across the web. And I just want to know if it's always available in NAV 2013 because you provide a new web client. So I just want to know if it's always available.
So what is always available?
The RTC over the WAN. You don't know this feature?
Yeah. RTC over WAN is available.
Okay.
Question about licensing. You speak about the license on the web client. Is it the same for the SharePoint? And also for this kind of persistent consumption of the license, is it tools or something automatic to kill persistent connections?
I really expect that the sessions are the same for SharePoint and web. But for sure, you need to go to Express Lab to answer that one. Then we find one that knows about licensing.
Are all browsers supported? Any known issues?
So,
for the web client.
Yeah, so we support many browsers. We support IE, Firefox, Chrome, and Safari on iPad actually as well. There are some small limitations. For example, you don't get a report viewer on the other browser than IE. However, you can download the PDFs for the report instead. So there are small limitations, but most of the functionality is supported cross browsers.